The CEO's golden boy labeled my genius as academic masturbation, so I handed our $900 million quantum breakthrough to our rivals. Because brilliance isn't owned, it's earned. And here's how I taught him that lesson. They claim intelligence comes in many forms, but Blake Morgan only recognized the kind backed by an Ivy League diploma and family connections, failing to understand that true brilliance doesn't flaunt credentials. It proves itself through results, and underestimating someone quietly building the foundation of your empire is a very costly mistake. My name is Mila Dawson, and at 29, I had just become the youngest principal research scientist in Next Tech Industries' 40-year history. Not that anyone in the suite cared. What mattered was how I looked in their promotional materials, not the revolutionary quantum computing algorithms I developed that were about to transform artificial intelligence forever. That morning, everything shifted like any other Tuesday. I arrived at our Boston headquarters at 6:45 a.m., watching the city stir through the panoramic windows of our 32nd floor lab, the Charles River reflecting the early sunlight like liquid silver, MIT's dome in the distance reminding me of the academic world I'd left behind for something bigger. I'd earned this view through 3 years of 90-hour weeks, breakthrough discoveries, and quantum innovations our competitors couldn't comprehend. My algorithms weren't just code, they were mathematical poetry, processing information in ways that defied conventional computing. That's when I first saw him striding across the floor like he owned it, which, technically, he soon would. Drawing attention effortlessly, 6 feet tall, auburn hair perfect, jawline straight out of an ad, charcoal suit worth more than most researchers made in 3 months, every inch of him screaming privilege. But it was his cold, calculating blue eyes that told the real story. "That's the new era, heir," whispered Emily, my closest colleague. Blake Morgan, CEO Leah's son, groomed to take over strategic operations. I watched him pause at workstations, nodding politely while comprehending nothing. His practiced smile political, the condescension in his voice making my skin crawl. "Interesting," he said to Dr. Rodriguez, detailing machine learning optimization. Eventually, he arrived at my station, where I was debugging a complex quantum entanglement simulation. My monitors displayed cascading code that looked like hieroglyphs to the untrained eye. "And you must be Ma Dawson," he said, extending a manicured hand. "Principal research scientist. Quite impressive for someone so—" His gaze drifted from my face to my figure. "Young." I shook his hand briefly, noting the softness of a lifetime avoiding manual labor. "Age is irrelevant when you focus on results, Mr. Morgan." "Blake, please. We'll be working closely together," he said, smiling without reaching his eyes. "I'm interested in Project Aurora. Quantum computing for AI enhancement?" "Correct. Project Aurora was my creation. 3 years of research producing algorithms capable of processing AI at speeds making current technology look prehistoric, with limitless applications in medical research, financial modeling, climate prediction, and space exploration. We were on the brink of something that could change everything. The Aurora framework utilizes quantum superposition principles to create neural networks that can exist in multiple states simultaneously, I explained, pulling up a demonstration on my primary monitor. Traditional AI processes information linearly, but quantum-enhanced systems can explore millions of possibilities in parallel. Blake nodded along, though I could see his eyes glazing over. He was hearing words without understanding their weight. "Fascinating. And this is all based on proprietary algorithms you've developed. 7 core patents with 14 subsidiary applications?" he asked. I confirmed, noting that perfecting the mathematics alone had taken 18 months. He repeated it slowly, as if tasting something bitter. "Right. Well, I'm sure the practical applications are what really matter." That sentence revealed everything about Blake Morgan. He viewed innovation as a product to be packaged and sold, not as the result of years of theoretical work and experimental failure. The practical applications flow directly from the mathematical foundations, I said patiently. You can't separate theory from implementation. Of course not, he agreed quickly, clearly uncomfortable as the conversation veered into territory he didn't understand. I'm more interested in the big picture. Market potential, competitive advantage, that sort of thing. Emily caught my eye from across the lab, eyebrow raised. We both recognized the pattern. MBA mentality meets PhD reality, and the MBA always assumed it mattered more. Mr. Morgan, Aurora represents roughly $900 million in projected market value over the next 5 years, I said, switching to terms he might actually grasp. Conservative estimates suggested we could capture 40% of the quantum computing market if executed properly. His eyes lit up immediately. Of course they did. Now that's what I want to hear. 900 million. He pulled out his phone, likely jotting a note. We'll need to discuss acceleration strategies. The market waits for no one. After Blake moved on to interrogate other departments, Sarah approached my workstation with 2 cups of coffee and a wary expression. That guy gives me the creeps, she said, settling beside me. Did you see how he looked at you? Like you were some kind of curiosity. I've dealt with worse, I replied, though her observation unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. His gaze had lingered in ways that felt uncomfortably personal. Mila, be careful around him. I've heard stories about how the Morgan family operates. They're sharks who smile while circling. I sipped my coffee, watching Blake through the glass walls of the conference room where he was holding court with senior management. His animated gestures and confident posture suggested he was already planning changes he didn't understand. Let him circle, I said quietly. Sharks are impressive until they meet something with bigger teeth. Sarah laughed nervously. Just promise me you won't do anything crazy if he pushes too hard. I turned back to my code, algorithms flowing across the screen like digital DNA. Define crazy. The next 2 weeks exposed Blake's true nature through a series of increasingly condescending interactions that made my jaw clench with suppressed frustration. During our first formal project review, Blake waltzed into the conference room 15 minutes late, coffee in hand, acting as if punctuality were optional when you own the building. Sorry, everyone, the conference call with Tokyo ran long, he announced, though I had seen him chatting with the receptionist moments earlier. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation detailing Aurora's development timeline, technical specifications, and projected milestones. 43 slides of meticulous research representing months of analysis. Let's get to the technical jargon, Blake interrupted after my 3rd slide. What's the bottom line? When can we bring this to market? The timeline depends on beta testing completion, regulatory approval for quantum computing applications, and… sweetheart, I need dates, not dissertations. Sweetheart. The room went silent. Dr. Peterson, our department head, shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. I set down my presentation remote with deliberate calm. Mr. Morgan, I am providing the information necessary to make informed decisions about a $900 million innovation. If you prefer oversimplified answers to complex questions, perhaps someone else should lead this review. Blake's smile faltered briefly before snapping back into place. Of course, you're absolutely right. Please continue with your thorough analysis. But the damage was done. He had already set the dynamic he wanted. I was the attractive scientist who got too deep into details, and he was the pragmatic leader keeping things focused on what really mattered. After the meeting, Dr. Peterson pulled me aside in the hallway. Mila, I know Blake's approach is different from what we're used to, but the family is making big changes, and we all need to adapt. Adapt to what? Being condescended to and dismissed under a new leadership style? Blake brings a fresh perspective from the business side, Dr. Peterson said. I stared at him, a man I'd respected for 3 years, watching him rationalize Blake's behavior simply because the Morgan family signed his paychecks. His perspective: technical expertise doesn't matter as long as the numbers look good. That's not fresh, Dr. Peterson. That's how companies fail. Just try to work with him, okay? For all our sake. Walking back to my lab, I realized institutional cowardice meant I would face Blake Morgan alone. Those who should have defended scientific rigor were already bowing to inherited authority. Blake's next move was subtle but just as insulting. He began scheduling informal check-ins with my team, positioning himself as the bridge between research and executive leadership. During these sessions, he asked dumbed-down questions, then re-explained our own innovations back to us in business speak. So essentially, he said during one particularly excruciating meeting, "You've created a faster computer that can multitask really well. The quantum stuff is just the engine under the hood, right?" I exchanged glances with my team, brilliant PhDs and research scientists, being treated like children learning about cars. That's an oversimplification that misses the fundamental breakthrough, I said. Quantum computing isn't just faster processing, it's an entirely different paradigm that allows for— Right, he interrupted. Write the technical details, but for presentation purposes, faster multitasking computer is what investors can understand. Investors should understand what they're investing in, I countered. Blake laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Mila, you're brilliant at the science stuff, no question, but business is about communication. Fortune 500 CEOs won't sit through quantum physics lectures. I respect your dedication to accuracy, but sometimes clarity must take priority over accuracy. That comment crystallized everything wrong with Blake's worldview. Technical truth was negotiable if it conflicted with marketing convenience. He genuinely believed understanding mattered less than appearing confident. After he left, Dr. Martinez, one of my senior researchers, spoke up. Mila, this guy's going to be a problem. He's already talking about streamlining our research documentation and focusing on deliverable outcomes. What does that mean? I asked. It means he wants us to stop exploring theoretical applications and just build whatever will sell fastest. A cold knot settled in my stomach. Aurora wasn't just a product to be rushed. It was the foundation for decades of future innovation. Cutting corners now would destroy its potential forever. Did he give you any specific directives? He wants us to prepare a simplified technical overview for the next board meeting, something that explains Aurora without getting bogged down in mathematical proofs. The absurdity was staggering. Blake wanted quantum computing explained without mathematics, like describing music without sound. That evening, I stayed late running security protocols and backing up all Aurora development data to encrypted drives. Call it instinct, but Blake's casual dismissal of technical complexity felt like a warning of something worse. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Working late again? Dedication is admirable, but work-life balance matters too. Blake. I stared at the message, skin crawling. How did he have my personal number? And why was he texting me at 9:30 p.m. about work-life balance? I didn't respond. The following Monday brought Blake's next escalation, a surprise announcement that he would present Aurora to the board himself, with me providing technical support as needed. I think it's important board members hear from someone who speaks their language, he explained during our team meeting. Mila's done incredible work, but translation is key. Translation, as if my ability to explain my own innovations was somehow inadequate. Blake, I've presented to the board multiple times. They're familiar with my communication style, I said. Of course, and your presentations are very thorough, he replied. I'm just thinking we need something with more punch, more business focus. Emily leaned forward. Will Mila have the opportunity to address technical questions directly? Absolutely, he assured her. If anything comes up that's too complex for business-level discussion, I'll defer to her expertise. The patronizing tone made my teeth ache. Blake was positioning himself as the primary voice of Aurora, while relegating me to the role of technical consultant for overflow questions. I'd prefer to co-present, I said firmly. The board should hear directly from the principal researcher about both technical capabilities and business applications. Blake's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this needs to be streamlined. Too many voices can confuse the message. My voice created the message. The room fell silent. Blake's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing something ugly before snapping back into place. Mila, I think you're misunderstanding the collaborative nature of what we're building here. Aurora is a team effort, and I'm just trying to ensure team success. Team effort. My 3 years of solo theoretical work, mathematical breakthroughs that no one else in the company could verify, had suddenly become a collaborative achievement Blake could present to the board. After the meeting, I made 2 calls. The first to Rebecca Torres, my patent attorney, asking her to review all Aurora IP documentation to ensure my personal ownership was ironclad. The second to Dr. James Wu at Titan Dynamics, Nextech's biggest competitor, accepting his long-standing invitation for lunch to discuss future opportunities. If Blake Morgan wanted to play games with my work, he was about to learn that some games have very expensive consequences. The board presentation itself was a masterclass in intellectual theft disguised as corporate leadership. Blake strode into the executive conference room as if he owned not just the company, but the very idea of innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone who never doubted their right to be heard. I'm excited to present Aurora, our revolutionary quantum computing breakthrough that will transform how the world processes artificial intelligence. Our revolutionary breakthrough, not mine. Ours. I sat in the designated technical advisor chair, watching Blake butcher 3 years of my research with broad generalizations and business buzzwords that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of what we'd actually built. Aurora represents a paradigm shift in computational thinking, he continued, clicking through slides I'd created, now bearing his name as primary presenter. By harnessing quantum superposition, think of it as nature's ultimate multitasking. We've created systems that process information in ways previously impossible. He was reading my own words back to me, simplified to the point of meaninglessness. Quantum superposition wasn't nature's ultimate multitasking. It was a fundamental property of matter, allowing particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. The comparison was like calling Einstein's theory of relativity a neat trick with time. Board member Margaret, no relation to Emily, raised her hand. Blake, can you explain the specific advantages over current AI processing methods? Blake glanced at me, and I could see the moment he realized he'd hit the limits of his prepared material. Ma can speak to the technical specifics, he said smoothly. But the key point is speed and capability improvements that position us years ahead of competitors. Margaret looked directly at me. Miss Dawson, what kind of performance improvements are we seeing? Finally, I was allowed to speak about my own work. Aurora's quantum-enhanced neural networks can process certain problem categories approximately 10,000 times faster than traditional systems, I explained, standing and moving to the presentation screen. More importantly, they can explore solution spaces classical computers physically cannot access. Can you give us a concrete example? I pulled up a demonstration I'd prepared separately, showing Aurora solving a protein folding problem that had stumped conventional supercomputers for months: medical research, financial modeling, climate prediction, any field requiring complex optimization across multiple variables. Aurora didn't just work faster, it worked differently, finding solutions other systems couldn't even perceive. The room was silent, absorbing the implications. These were intelligent people who understood the true magnitude of what I was describing. "What's our projected market advantage?" asked Robert Kim, the financial board member. "Conservative estimates suggest a 5-year lead over competitors," I replied. "The mathematical foundations alone would take other companies years to replicate, assuming they could even attract the right talent." Blake stepped back into the conversation, clearly uncomfortable with how long I had been speaking. "Exactly the kind of competitive advantage we need," he said, moving between me and the board. "Which brings us to our go-to-market strategy." He launched into a timeline that made my stomach drop. Blake wanted beta testing to begin in 6 months and full commercial release within 18 months. A schedule that would require cutting corners on safety testing, regulatory compliance, and system optimization. "Blake," I interrupted, unable to stay silent. "That timeline assumes everything goes perfectly. Quantum computing applications require extensive validation to ensure stability and security." "Of course," he replied, his tone dripping with the suggestion that I was stating the obvious. "But we also can't let perfect be the enemy of good. First mover advantage is everything in tech." "Not if we release something that fails catastrophically in the field," I said. Blake's smile tightened, strained. "Mila, I appreciate your caution, but we need to balance technical perfectionism with market realities." Technical perfectionism, as if ensuring our quantum computing platform wouldn't collapse under real-world conditions was some kind of luxury. Board member Patricia Williams leaned forward. "Ms. Dawson, what do you see as a reasonable timeline for a stable commercial release?" 24 to 30 months minimum," I said honestly. "Quantum systems are inherently fragile. We need extensive testing to ensure reliability across different computational environments." Blake's jaw tightened. "Or we could prioritize core functionality and iterate quickly based on user feedback. That's how successful tech companies operate." The fundamental difference in our philosophies couldn't have been clearer. Blake saw Aurora as software to be debugged through customer complaints, while I saw it as a quantum system that could cause massive data corruption or security breaches if rushed prematurely. After the board meeting, Blake cornered me in the hallway, his professional mask finally slipping. "What was that in there?" he demanded, voice low but furious. "That was honesty about development timelines. That was sabotage. You made me look like I don't understand the technical requirements. Do you understand the technical requirements?" He stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that made my skin crawl. "Listen carefully, Mila. I'm trying to be collaborative here, but you're making it very difficult. This company needs leadership that can balance technical excellence with business pragmatism. And you think you provide that leadership? I think I provide the kind of leadership that turns brilliant research into profitable products. Your job is to make sure the technology works. My job is to make sure it succeeds in the market." I stared at him, recognizing the fundamental arrogance of his position. Blake genuinely believed that technical expertise was subordinate to business strategy, that the person who built something mattered less than the person who sold it. "Blake, without technical excellence, you have nothing to sell. Aurora isn't just another software product to be rushed to market and patched later. It's a quantum system that requires precision at every level. Everything cannot simply be optimized post-launch. That's what updates are for." The ignorance was breathtaking. Blake wanted to treat quantum computing like a mobile app that could be patched whenever users reported bugs. "You can't update quantum mechanical behavior, Blake. Either the mathematics work correctly, or they don't. There is no middle ground." "There's always a middle ground. That's what business is about. Finding workable compromises." I realized at that moment that Blake Morgan embodied everything wrong with modern corporate culture. The belief that expertise was negotiable, that complexity could be flattened by sheer will, and that understanding something mattered less than controlling it. I need to get back to work, I said, stepping around him. Blake's voice followed me down the hallway. Mila, we're going to need to discuss your attitude problem soon. This kind of resistance isn't sustainable. Attitude problem? Because insisting on technical accuracy was now a character flaw? That evening, I called Dr. James Wu at Titan Dynamics and scheduled lunch for the following Friday. If Blake wanted to treat Aurora as his personal property, despite having no understanding of how it worked, he was about to learn that some intellectual property couldn't be stolen, only lost. The lunch took place at a discreet Cambridge restaurant, far from Nextech's Boston headquarters. James was everything Blake wasn't, a PhD in theoretical physics, who had built Titan Dynamics from the ground up through genuine technical innovation, not inherited wealth. Mila, I've been following your publications for years, he said over appetizers. Your work on quantum classical interface protocols is groundbreaking. How are you finding the corporate environment at NXT? I chose my words carefully, aware that this conversation could change everything. The technical challenges are stimulating, but the business leadership has become complicated. James nodded knowingly. Blake Morgan. I've heard stories from colleagues who've dealt with him at conferences. Charming but shallow, more interested in claiming credit than understanding fundamentals. That's diplomatic, I replied. I didn't have to work with him. James leaned forward. Mila, I'll be direct. Titan has been developing quantum computing capabilities, but we're years behind where you are with Aurora. If you ever want to lead a research division with full technical autonomy and unlimited budget, I'd like to continue this conversation. The offer hung in the air. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to bring Aurora's innovations to someone who truly understood science. That's generous, I said, but Aurora was developed at Nextech using their resources. Aurora was developed by you, using your intellect. Equipment and funding are tools. Innovation comes from individuals. The patents are in your name. Correct. I nodded. Through careful legal structuring with Rebecca, my core patents were personally owned and licensed to Nextech, not assigned. Protection I had insisted on after watching other researchers lose control of their discoveries. Then you have options, James continued. If Nextech isn't providing the environment you need for meaningful research, other opportunities exist. What kind of opportunities? I asked. Lead researcher position with equity participation, full team autonomy, and unlimited budget for advanced quantum computing research. We're talking about building something that could leapfrog not just Next, but every other player in the quantum space. The vision was intoxicating. Working for someone who understood the science, with resources to push Aurora far beyond Blake's rushed timeline. I need to consider all the implications, I said carefully. Of course, he replied. Brilliant minds deserve to work in environments that value brilliance. You've spent 3 years building something extraordinary. Don't let lesser minds diminish what you've achieved. That evening, I returned to my lab to find Blake sitting at my desk, scrolling through files on my primary monitor. Blake, what are you doing here? I demanded. He looked up with that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Just familiarizing myself with the current development status. As Aurora's project lead, I need to stay current on all technical progress. Project lead? When had that happened? According to whom are you Aurora's project lead? According to organizational necessity, he said. The board needs clear accountability, and I'm accountable for Aurora's commercial success. I moved to my workstation, noting which files he had accessed, mostly documentation and progress reports. Nothing containing the core algorithms, but the violation still made my blood boil. Blake, accessing other people's workstations without permission is a security violation. It's my mother's company, Mila. Security violations don't apply to executive oversight. The casual admission of nepotism was breathtaking. Blake genuinely believed family ownership exempted him from professional norms and ethical boundaries. Executive oversight does not include unauthorized access to secured research data. Blake stood, moving uncomfortably close. You know, Mila, you're incredibly talented, but talent without teamwork is just masturbation. Impressive to watch, but ultimately unproductive. The crude comparison made my skin crawl, yet it also revealed how Blake truly saw me, a brilliant performer whose work existed for his entertainment and control. Teamwork requires mutual respect, Blake, something you've shown no interest in providing. I respect your abilities. I just think you need guidance on how to apply them productively. Whose definition of productive? Blake's mask slipped again, revealing the arrogance beneath, the definition that turns research into revenue. Look, Mila, you're brilliant at the technical stuff, but business requires a broader perspective. You see quantum computing. I see market dominance. And if market dominance compromises technical integrity that can't generate profit is just expensive masturbation. Again, his repeated sexual metaphor wasn't accidental. Blake was deliberately making me uncomfortable, asserting dominance through inappropriate language in a professional setting. I need to finish my work, I said, moving to my chair and pointedly turning away. Blake didn't leave immediately. Instead, he lingered behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne and feel his presence like a physical weight. Mila, we're going to be working together for a long time. It would be better if we found ways to collaborate more effectively. The way he said collaborate made my stomach churn. There was an undertone that had nothing to do with professional partnership. Collaboration requires competence from both parties. Blake's hand landed on my shoulder and I jerked away as if burned. Don't touch me. Easy. Just trying to be friendly. You seem tense. I seem focused on work, which you're interrupting. Blake finally backed away, but his voice carried a warning. Mila, this attitude is becoming a real problem. I've been patient, but patience has limits. After he left, I immediately changed all my passwords, ran security scans on my workstation, and backed up Aurora's complete codebase to encrypted drives stored offsite. Blake's behavior had crossed from professional incompetence into personal harassment, and I refused to be victimized. More importantly, I scheduled another meeting with Dr. Wu for the following week. Blake's threats and inappropriate behavior had made my decision easier. If he wanted to treat me like an obstacle to be removed, rather than the scientist who built Aurora, he was about to discover what happened when the obstacle fought back. The next morning brought an email that crystallized everything wrong with Blake's leadership approach. Sent to the entire Aurora development team, it outlined restructuring initiatives that made my blood run cold. Team, after careful review of our development processes, I'm implementing several efficiency improvements to ensure Aurora meets its aggressive launch timeline. Effective immediately, all technical decisions require business-side approval to ensure market viability. Research focus will shift from theoretical optimization to practical implementation. Documentation requirements will be streamlined to reduce administrative overhead. Team meetings will be reorganized under centralized leadership to improve communication. These changes will help us maintain Aurora's competitive edge while ensuring responsible resource allocation. Please see me individually to discuss how these adjustments affect your specific roles. Best regards, Blake Morgan, Aurora Project Lead. I stared at the email, recognizing corporate doublespeak for what it was. Blake was seizing control of technical decisions he didn't understand, eliminating theoretical research that might delay his timeline, reducing documentation that provided accountability, and positioning himself as the sole decision-maker for Aurora's development. Emily appeared at my workstation within minutes, looking as outraged as I felt. Mila, this is insane. Technical decisions require business-side approval. He doesn't even understand the difference between quantum superposition and classical computing. That's exactly why he's doing it, I replied. Blake knows he can't contribute technically, so he's ensuring that all technical contributions must flow through him first. But that will slow everything down to a crawl. Every optimization, every bug fix, every improvement will need to be explained to someone who lacks the background to evaluate it. Dr. Martinez joined the conversation, his face grim. It gets worse. I just talked to Blake about my quantum error correction research. He wants me to suspend it because it's not directly applicable to current implementation goals. The stupidity was staggering. Quantum error correction was fundamental to Aurora's stability. Without it, the system would be prone to decoherence that could corrupt calculations or cause complete failures. He's going to the entire project, Sarah said quietly. This isn't efficiency improvement. This is ego management. I looked around at my team, brilliant researchers who had dedicated years to pushing the boundaries of quantum computing, being reduced to code monkeys who needed permission to pursue the very innovations that had made Aurora possible. I have a meeting with him this afternoon, I said. Let me see if I can talk some sense into him. But as I spoke the words, I knew they were hollow. Blake wasn't interested in sense. He was interested in control. And control meant reducing everyone else to subordinate positions, regardless of expertise. The meeting took place in his newly renovated office, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows, leather furniture, and abstract art that probably cost more than most researchers' annual salaries. He sat behind a massive desk like a king granting audience to a subject. Mila, glad you could make it. I wanted to discuss how the restructuring affects your role specifically. I remained standing, refusing to accept the supplicant position he was trying to establish. Blake, this restructuring will destroy Aurora's development timeline and compromise its technical integrity. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to move past. You're seeing obstacles where I see opportunities for streamlined decisions. Streamlined by whom? You don't have the technical background to evaluate quantum computing decisions. Blake's smile tightened. I have the business background to evaluate whether technical decisions support our commercial objectives. And when those objectives conflict with technical requirements, they won't. If the technical team focuses on practical solutions instead of theoretical perfection. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Blake genuinely believed that business goals took precedence over scientific accuracy, that market pressure could somehow override the laws of physics. Blake, quantum computing doesn't work that way. You can't sacrifice theoretical accuracy for practical convenience. The mathematics either work or they don't. Everything can be optimized, Mila. That's what iteration is for. You can't iterate quantum mechanical behavior. Either your equations describe reality correctly, or your system fails catastrophically. Blake leaned back in his chair, studying me with those cold blue eyes. You know what I think? I think you're so invested in being the smartest person in the room that you can't accept collaborative leadership. This isn't about technical requirements. This is about control. The projection was breathtaking. Blake, who had positioned himself as the arbiter of all technical decisions despite lacking basic understanding, was accusing me of control issues for insisting on scientific accuracy. This is about ensuring Aurora actually works when we release it. Aurora will work because we'll make it work. That's what successful teams do. They adapt, they compromise, they find solutions. And when adaptation and compromise require violating the laws of physics, Blake stood up, moving around his desk to loom over me in a way meant to intimidate. Mila, you're brilliant, but brilliance without leadership is just academic masturbation. I'm offering you the chance to be part of something bigger than your research, but you have to be willing to accept guidance. There it was again, the crude sexual metaphor designed to demean and control. Blake's repeated use of this insult revealed how he really saw intellectual work as self-indulgent performance that needed his masculine business sense to become useful. I don't need guidance from someone who thinks quantum computing is nature's ultimate multitasking. Blake's face flushed red. That's exactly the kind of arrogant, condescending attitude that makes you impossible to work with. And your ignorant, dismissive attitude makes you unqualified to lead this project. The words hung in the air, and I realized I'd crossed a line Blake wouldn't forgive. His expression shifted from anger to something colder, more calculating. Mila, I've tried to be patient with you, but this conversation makes it clear that significant changes are necessary. I'll be recommending to the board that Aurora's leadership structure needs immediate adjustment. Meaning what? Meaning someone needs to take responsibility for ensuring this project succeeds, and that someone clearly isn't you. I stared at him, recognizing the threat for what it was. He was going to try to remove me from Aurora entirely, claiming my attitude and lack of collaboration made me unsuitable for continued involvement. Blake, I created Aurora. Every algorithm, every innovation, every breakthrough came from my research. You can't run the project without me. Actually, I can. We have documentation, code repositories, and a team of talented researchers who can continue development under proper leadership. The delusion was complete. Blake genuinely believed Aurora's innovations could be replicated by others following my documentation, like following a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Documentation doesn't replace understanding. The other researchers were talented, but they hadn't developed the theoretical foundations. Then they'll learn. That's what smart people do. They adapt. I left Blake's office knowing war had been declared. He was going to try to push me out of Aurora while keeping my innovations, turning 3 years of my research into his personal path to executive success. But Blake had made a crucial miscalculation. He assumed that controlling the corporate environment meant controlling me. He was about to learn otherwise. That evening, I called Dr. Wu and accepted his offer. James, I'm ready to discuss terms. Excellent. When can you start? I need 2 weeks to handle the transition properly. But James, you should know my departure from Next Tech might get messy. Blake Morgan isn't going to accept losing Aurora gracefully. Let me worry about Blake Morgan. Can you bring your patents with you? Every single one. They're personally owned and licensed to Next Tech, not assigned. When I terminate the licensing agreement, Aurora becomes nothing more than expensive hardware. And your team, Emily and Dr. Martinez, have already expressed interest in making moves. Blake's restructuring has everyone looking for exits. Mila, this is going to be the acquisition of the decade. Aurora's capabilities with Titan's resources and infrastructure will leapfrog every competitor in the quantum space. After finalizing the details with James, I spent the weekend implementing my exit strategy. Every line of Aurora's core code was backed up to secure servers outside Nextech's network. All research documentation was copied to encrypted drives. Most importantly, I prepared the legal notice terminating my patent licensing agreement with Nextech. Rebecca Torres had crafted the termination letter with surgical precision. Under the terms of the original licensing agreement, I could revoke Nextech's usage rights if they breached the contract through unauthorized modifications or attempts to circumvent my intellectual property protections. Blake's restructuring and attempted seizure of technical control provided exactly the breach I needed. Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, knowing this would be my last week at Nextech. Blake was already in the lab, hovering over Emily's workstation with 2 security guards flanking him. Mila, perfect timing, he said without looking up. We need to discuss some security concerns. I approached slowly, noting the way the guards positioned themselves between me and the exit. What kind of security concerns? Blake finally turned to face me, his expression mixing triumph with something far uglier. Concerns about unauthorized access to proprietary systems, potential intellectual property theft, and communications with competitive entities. My blood ran cold. Somehow Blake had discovered my meetings with Dr. Wu. I don't know what you're talking about, do you? Blake replied coldly, pulling out his phone and shoving it in front of my face. The screen showed grainy photos taken from across the street at the Cambridge restaurant where I'd met James, Dr. James Wu, CEO of Titan Dynamics. Interesting lunch companion for someone with access to Aurora's complete specifications. The surveillance was illegal and vindictive, but Blake clearly didn't care about legality now that his position was threatened. Having lunch with a colleague isn't a security violation, I said evenly. Having lunch with a competitor while discussing proprietary technology certainly is, he snapped, nodding to the security guards. Miss Dawson's system access needs to be suspended immediately pending investigation. I watched as one of them moved toward my workstation, locking me out of systems I'd built from the ground up. Blake, you can't restrict my access without due process and formal charges. Actually, I can. Security protocols allow immediate suspension when corporate espionage is suspected. Corporate espionage. He was going nuclear, accusing me of the most serious violation possible. Emily stepped forward, pale but resolute. Blake, this is insane. Mila created Aurora. She's not stealing anything. Emily, focus on your own responsibilities. This doesn't concern you. Sarah didn't back down. It concerns all of us. You're accusing the most ethical researcher I know of espionage based on a photograph of her eating lunch. Blake's mask finally shattered, revealing the vicious authoritarian underneath. Emily, your continued employment depends on your ability to follow instructions and avoid insubordination. Choose your next words carefully. The threat was explicit. He was isolating me through fear, holding my colleagues' livelihoods hostage. I looked around the lab at people who had worked beside me for 3 years, seeing the conflict on their faces. It's okay, I told Sarah quietly. Don't risk your career for this. As I spoke, I sent a single text to Rebecca Torres. Execute immediately. Blake was too busy savoring his moment to notice the move that would destroy everything he was trying to steal. You'll surrender all company property, laptop, badge, documentation, and any Aurora-related materials, he ordered. I complied, handing over what belonged to them. What I didn't surrender was my personal phone, my encrypted off-site backups, or the legal bomb already counting down. You'll hear from our legal department about potential criminal charges, Blake said as security escorted me out. Corporate espionage carries serious penalties. I smiled at him, the first genuine smile I'd ever given Blake Morgan. You're absolutely right. Corporate espionage does carry serious penalties. I look forward to seeing how that works out for you. The confusion on his face was perfect. He thought he'd won. By Tuesday afternoon, his victory had turned to ash. Rebecca's formal letter hit Nextech's legal department and the entire board, terminating their license to use my quantum computing patents due to material breach of contract, unauthorized seizure of control, circumvention of IP protections, and removal of the patent holder from oversight. Then, Aurora began to fail. Without my authentication protocols and continuous optimization, decoherence errors spiraled out of control. By Wednesday, Aurora was producing garbage outputs, crashing servers, and collapsing under the very shortcuts Blake had forced into place. Blake called me 17 times. I didn't answer. Thursday brought the news I'd been waiting for. Titan Dynamics announced the acquisition of my revolutionary quantum computing patents, along with my appointment as Chief Innovation Officer and Director of Quantum Research. The press release hit like a bomb. Dr. Dawson's groundbreaking work in quantum-enhanced artificial intelligence represents a paradigm shift in computational capability. Titan Dynamics is honored to provide the resources and research environment necessary for continued innovation at the highest levels. Blake's calls became increasingly frantic, incoherent, and desperate. Security guards had to escort him from my apartment building when he showed up demanding I fix this mess. Friday's board meeting at Nextech was reportedly a massacre. Margaret called me directly. Mila, the board needs to understand what's happening. Aurora is completely non-functional, and Blake claims you sabotaged the systems. Margaret, I didn't sabotage anything. I terminated a licensing agreement that Blake violated by trying to seize control of my intellectual property. Can this be resolved? The company has invested millions in Aurora development. I looked out over the Boston skyline from my temporary office at Titan Dynamics, surrounded by resources that dwarfed anything Nextech had ever provided. Margaret made it clear, Nextech never valued my contributions. Blake had called my work academic masturbation and tried to push me out while keeping my innovations. Resolution was never his goal. What would it take to restore the licensing agreement? She asked. The question I'd been waiting for. Blake's immediate termination, public acknowledgement that Aurora was built on my proprietary technology, and a licensing fee reflecting the true value of what Nextech had lost. How much are we talking about? $900 million? The full projected value of Aurora over 5 years. Margaret's silence stretched. Mila, that's more than the company is worth. Unfortunate, but it's less than what Blake cost you by trying to steal what he couldn't build himself. The call ended, but I knew the board was in full panic mode. Aurora, their supposed flagship for the next decade, was now nothing more than expensive computer equipment. Monday brought Blake's termination announcement. Tuesday, his father, Leah Morgan, personally called, begging me to reconsider. Wednesday, they offered $200 million to buy back the patents. I turned them all down. Thursday, I held a press conference at Titan Dynamics Cambridge headquarters, standing beside quantum computing prototypes that made Aurora look primitive. Innovation requires environments that nurture and respect scientific excellence, I told the assembled tech reporters. When corporations prioritize control over competence, they lose more than talented researchers. They lose their future. A reporter asked about Blake specifically. I smiled, remembering his condescending lectures about business reality and market pragmatism. Blake Morgan never understood that you can't steal someone's mind. You can steal their work, copy their code, even claim credit for their innovations. But the thinking that creates breakthrough technology lives in the person who did the work.